This is the Serpentbone Blade, and I hope you're having a good one. The Serpentbone Blade in Elden Ring is a particularly odd katana. You can obtain it via the Volcano Manor questline via the second letter quest that you obtain. The weapon of self is a bit of an anomaly in many ways. It requires 11 strength to use as well as 22 dexterity. For starters, it is upgraded with smithing stones, yet it can't actually be infused with any Ashes of War, and you're stuck with the weapon how it is, basically. And what we get here is a weapon that has an E scaling in strength, a C scaling in dex that does increase to a B scaling as you level it up. Features the double slash Ash of War, which is a pretty good Ash of War for this weapon for what it's trying to do, as well as the fact that the weapon has a unique power attack that also is pretty much just another form of double slash. It's like a 2 quick slashes type thing that you do. And on top of all of this, the weapon itself inflicts poison. Now, some of my more astute and observant viewers out there might realize that this is a weapon with a status effect that doesn't have an arcane scaling that we also can't give an arcane scaling to, meaning that we can't scale that status effect at all by any means. And maybe this is for a good reason. You see, the Serpentbone Blade actually inflicts a unique form of poison in the game known as lethal poison. It's not stated outright outside of the weapon's description, telling you that it is coated in a lethal poison, which could just be, someone could just perceive that as, you know, flavor text for the weapon. But no, it actually does mean something. Lethal poison both ticks faster than normal poison, deals more damage per tick than normal poison, but it doesn't last as long as normal poison. It lasts only about a third of the duration. But if it is left to, if the entire duration of lethal poison is left to play out, it does actually deal more damage than normal poison. And the only thing you need to do to actually inflict this form of poison is make it so the Serpentbone Blade is the weapon that actually causes the poison to be inflicted. It doesn't matter if the rest of the poison was obtained via another weapon of sorts or any other sort of tool. As long as the Serpentbone Blade is actually the weapon to break that poison threshold and inflict the poison, it will be lethal poison, as far as I'm aware. Now, the overall build I decided to go with for this weapon, you might be inclined to put this weapon on a dex build. And you could, but the damage on the Serpentbone Blade isn't really that good. I have a feeling that that C and B scaling is more of a low B scaling and not really the greatest scaling in the world. I noticed when I tried it on a pure dex build that both the weapon dealt a pretty mediocre amount of damage, as well as the fact that the poison actually doesn't apply that fast by itself, meaning that you aren't really getting a lot of pressure out of the thing. So our strategy then, of course, is to put it on an arcane build, because, I don't know, I like arcane builds, and why not put anything on an arcane build, and it makes more sense. My strat was to offhand it, or was to mainhand it alongside another katana that would be inflicted with poison to help inflict that poison and get it over the edge, you know what I mean? The overall stats I used for this thing was at level 85 alongside plus 17 and plus 7 weapons. And we had 40 vigor, 9 mind, 25 endurance, 18 strength, 22 dexterity, 7 intelligence, 8 faith, and 40 arcane. The talismans I mostly used for this build were the Great Jar's Arsenal, of course, for more equip load, the Kindred of Rot Exaltation, which gives you more damage for about 20 seconds, I believe. I think it's 20% more damage for 20 seconds whenever there is poison or rot inflicted to yourself or an enemy around you, or really anything around you. Millicent's Prosthesis, which gives us plus 5 in dexterity to help save some levels. So we actually only have we only have a 17 in dex, but with Millicent's Prosthesis, we take that up to 22, of course. And additionally, Millicent's Prosthesis has the Winged Sword effect on it, so as you deal more hits or Multiple hits in a short period of time will cause your damage to go up, which is quite useful for a weapon like this, especially since we are going to be power stancing it alongside another katana. And lastly, I just put on the Crimson Amber Medallion +1, just for the extra health. In terms of armor, you can pretty much rock whatever you want. In a lot of these clips, you'll see me using the Mushroom Crown, which actually features the same effect as the Kindred of Rot Exaltation. I believe it is 20% damage for 20 seconds if there is any poison or rot infliction around you, which is pretty useful. If you stack them both together, that's a pretty intense amount of damage that you can get for a short period of time. Otherwise, though, you can pretty much rock whatever gear you want to. In the Wondrous Physic Flask, since we're doing invasions here, I pretty much always roll with the Leaden Hard tier, as well as the Crimson Whirl Bubble tier. It just feels like the best combination in invasions a lot of the time. It allows you to both have infinite poise, as well as pretty much ignore a lot of magic damage in this game. You can pretty much drink it right at the beginning and run at people and try to get the poison out on them as fast as possible. So that's what we're rocking with. The weapons we're actually using for this build, of course, we're using the Serpentbone Blade as it is the star of the show to some degree. We're going to also be offhanding a Nagakiba, which is going to feature the Poisonous Mist Ash of War. Poisonous Mist is quite nice, as you can buff your weapon with more poison status application. When you actually use a thing, it obviously sends out that little poisonous mist, which if people stand in it, they pretty much get poisoned pretty much instantly. If they stand in the mist, it actually inflicts a lot of poison, I noticed. Like, there are multiple times where people would just run at me and I'd use poisonous mist on them. I'd actually hit them with the swing of the sword because it has a hitbox, and they would literally just get instantly poisoned, which is pretty useful. Otherwise, if you do buff it with the poison and with it being infused with poison, you pretty much poison people in about 3 hits, which, since we're power stancing, that happens pretty darn quickly. And we're also having some other weapons in this mix here. I noticed that when I first started this build, and I was going through many iterations of it, for the beginning it was just a dex build with the Serpentbone Blade, and that, I won't lie, that pretty much sucked a huge lot of it. It was not very good at all. Then I started offhanding a Nagakiba in an arcane build, and that was a lot better, as I was actually poisoning people. It didn't take a whole year just to get poison off on someone. But I was still noticing the build was struggling a little bit, particularly in the damage section. The poison is nice, but I'll admit, lethal poison is not Scarlet Rot levels of damage over time. It's not poison plus Scarlet Rot levels of damage over time. It's not a whole lot of damage over time. It's just enough to pressure an opponent and to deal damage to an opponent to make them feel a bit uneasy about certain things, but it's not nearly enough on its own to outright kill someone. And the damage from both the Nagakiba and the Serpentbone Blade is just okay. It ends up being pretty decent if we stack up, of course, the Kindred of Rot Exaltation alongside Millicent's Prosthesis with the multiple hits and the Mushroom Crown, but that's a lot of factors you need to line up for it to really go over that barrier of Elden Ring damage, if you know what I mean. That really huge burst of damage that we like to see. So I thought to myself, well, when I poison someone, there really isn't any purpose in using poison weapons anymore. I've already poisoned them. I can't poison them any further. All I'm doing basically is using weapons that have reduced damage for the fact that they have poison on them. So I came up with an idea. What if we offhanded double bleed curve swords? Oh yes, this is going to get really, really nasty, trust me. In the offhand, for soft swapping, once we actually poison someone, we have the Scavenger's Curved Sword and the Falchion, both bleed infused. The Scavenger's Curved Sword features Poison Moth Flight, which I think is a pretty nice Ash of War that isn't really talked about all that much. I tried to use it a lot, or tried to use it as much as possible in this build when I thought it was applicable, and it does do a pretty solid amount of damage because it deals extra damage if someone is poisoned, which is obviously has some nice synergy with the rest of the build. And it's got some nice forward momentum to it. The Falchion is just infused with Bloody Slash. I didn't really use it that much. I just put it on there just in case, but I never ended up using it. But the main point here is that we have 2 bleed curved swords, and the power stance running attack for the curved swords is probably the most insane attack in the entire game, particularly for running someone down if they're trying to get away from you. It hits an opponent 4 times between 2 slashes, and with the fact that both of these weapons have a 107 in bleed application, you can guarantee that basically every opponent on the entire planet is going to get bled from that. So the idea here is that we poison someone, we soft swap to our power stance curved swords, and then we run them the fuck down and try to kill them. They can spam roll, of course, but then the poison will tick down slowly at them and deal damage to them, which is quite nice. The idea here, obviously, is for them to panic, maybe try to go to restore the poison or heal themselves, and then we smack them in the face with some curved swords for a huge amount of burst damage. On top of that, if we've inflicted our poison against the opponent, that means for the next 20 seconds, 20-ish seconds, we'll have 40% increased damage. I don't think this affects bleed at all, because bleed is based off of max health, but it does affect, of course, the damage we're dealing with the curved swords outright, and it does make them deal quite a bit more damage. I do think the playstyle is a particularly aggressive one. If you're the type of person that likes to see big damage numbers and also play really aggressively, then this is the type of shit that you're going to be kind of into, like me. When I get into an invasion with these weapons, I usually like to size up the situation. I usually like to buff up with Poisonous Mist. I usually drink my Wondrous Physic Flask for my poise as well as Crimson Whirl effect, and then I try to run at someone, and I usually try to poison my opponents. A couple of advice, or some advice for power stance katanas. Katanas aren't what they used to be in this game. They're not nearly as good as they were in the past. I'll be honest, I think katanas are actually kind of meh in this game, but they're just so fun to use, so you can't deny that. Some of the good attacks to use on katanas, particularly if you're power stancing them, the running R2 is pretty decent. It's just like, you know, the old school running R1 for katanas, but a little worse as it's a bit slower and doesn't have as much forward momentum. The running L1 is pretty decent if you can time it well. Obviously, it hits twice. The rolling attack is actually quite good, and I didn't realize that in a lot of the early clips, but in some of the later clips I've been collected, I started using it a lot more, especially out of crouch. It seems like a lot of weapons in this game benefit from using their rolling attack out of crouch, which is quite fun. And the katana rolling attack is quite good. The power stance jumping L1 is also decent, so definitely use that one. Those are probably the main attacks I'm using, particularly since those attacks actually hit twice, which means I can build up poison a lot faster. I also started to value double slash quite a bit more later on. The double slash on the Serpentbone Blade is actually quite good, and it does build up the poison quite quickly. The only problem with it is, you know, the weapon's quite lackluster range, I feel, compared to other katanas, but double slash does feature a pretty decent amount of forward momentum when it comes to the Ashes of War. If you also want to swap a talisman out, you could swap out one of the talismans for the Shard of Alexander. If you really want to, you could swap out the Crimson Amber Medallion for the Shard of Alexander and get more damage on something like double slash. I think some of my earliest clips do feature the Shard of Alexander. I was experimenting with it, and it is quite fun to use. However, I do prefer being a little bit tankier in invasions, as there's a lot of damage usually getting thrown your way, and the Crimson Amber Medallion does help quite a bit with the tankiness. After we actually poison someone, of course, we immediately soft swap to our double curved swords. Earlier on, I was trying to hard swap to the double curved swords, but honestly, maybe it is just so hard to hard swap into 2 weapons, especially in invasions when there's so many people pressuring you and you have such a limited amount of time to, you know, actually get those weapons out and make a play. I think you have to be a pretty god-tier hard swapper. Hard swapping, of course, meaning that I'm actually going into my menu and switching out the katanas for the curved swords. If you're a god at hard swapping and swapping your weapons in general, you could probably get away with rocking just the katanas, being able to take away some points from endurance and actually just putting them elsewhere. and then hard swapping into the curved swords whenever you poison someone. But I am not that good at swapping just yet, so we opt for a little bit more endurance, the Great Jar's Arsenal, and we're going to soft swap into the double curved swords, and I pretty much run at the person that is poisoned and start running attack, doing the power stance running attack with the curved swords to try to kill them as fast as possible. Now, I feel like this is the section of the video where I'm supposed to tell you that the Serpentbone Blade strong attack, or power attack, whatever you want to call it, the heavy attack, is secretly overpowered, insane, and crazy good. It's this unique strong attack that's being overlooked by people. How could it not be? In reality, I don't think the heavy attack of the Serpentbone Blade is that good, to be honest. It is a unique R2. It is very cool. It is a very cool unique R2. But it's really not that good in comparison to many other things. For starters, you already have a multi-slash on your weapon. You have double slash, and you're not getting rid of double slash, obviously, as we've been over. So it feels kind of awkward on this weapon to have two multi-slashes. I understand the idea here is that, you know, you're supposed to hit the opponent a lot of times and build up poison. But the R2 both doesn't feature a lot of forward momentum unless you fully charge it, and even then the forward momentum is kind of mediocre. And it just feels very sluggish to use as opposed to just your double slash Ash of War. And double slash also hits more times. It hits 2 and then 3 times, and another 1 time if you wanted to, making it a total of 6 times, whereas the R2 only hits 4 times if you combo the R2s together, if you do both of them, and they also come out a good bit slower. It's a unique novelty, but I don't think it's really that good. I actually think, now, if you remember from Dark Souls 2, do you remember the Black Steel Katana in that game? Maybe the Ayato from, I think that's how it's pronounced, from Dark Souls 1 might ring a bell. Those weapons had a unique R2 that was essentially a forward dash. It was like that forward samurai dash, that really cool shit, you know what I mean? And the Black Steel Katana from Dark Souls 2 even featured a forward thrust afterwards that you could do that had a lot of forward momentum. I think the Serpentbone Blade would have been a perfect candidate for that heavy attack instead of the one that we've gotten. I mean, the thing already has double slash, so it feels kind of redundant to just give it this unique double slashing strong attack. It just does feel weird, and additionally it would help with some of the range issues that I feel the Serpentbone Blade has. You'll get a lot of forward momentum out of that R2. You could probably roll catch with it. People love roll catching. We all love roll catching, don't we? And I mean, it would just be a good time. It would be a cool, unique thing. I can understand maybe why they didn't want to put it in, as it is very similar to the Unsheath Ash of War that we already have, but I still think it would have been a pretty neat addition to the Serpentbone Blade over the heavy attack that we got. So overall, is the weapon good? Is the Serpentbone Blade this secret OP thing that no one is talking about, or very few people are talking about? No, it's not. I'll be outright with you. It's not the greatest weapon in the world. If you're going to poison people, you might as well just use a poison weapon, or a weapon with poison on it in an arcane build. The lethal poison, while it is quite neat and probably pretty good for PvE, it's really just a weird middle ground between Scarlet Rot and poison. It's one of those things where if you wanted to use it, there are both a limited amount of tools that can inflict it. There are only 3 tools in the game that can inflict deadly poison or lethal poison, whatever you prefer to call it. That being the Serpentbone Blade, as this video was about, the Venomous Fang, and Fetid Pots. I don't believe you can inflict both regular poison and lethal poison. You have to basically pick and choose. And it's one of those things where it's both probably just easier to rock, you know, 2 weapons that have poison infused on them with an arcane scaling to be able to get the poison out as fast as possible. Or just use Scarlet Rot, use the Ant Spud Rapiers and run people down and hit them with poison and Scarlet Rot. It's a weird middle ground, and the weapon itself doesn't deal a whole lot of damage. We've already talked about how I think katanas have kind of an odd the moveset of katanas in this game is not the greatest, I think. So they're not great at aggression, at least. So the weapon does have quite a few problems, but it's fun, and I think that's what matters the most here, is this is a fun build to play. The Serpentbone Blade is super unique. It's very cool looking at the very least. You inflict a lot of poison on people, and you know what's funnier than inflicting poison on people? Switching to power stance curved swords and running them the hell down and bleeding them to death and watching their entire health bar disappear. For a bit, I was worried that maybe I was relying too much on the curved swords, and to some degree, I maybe am. Maybe this video isn't just about the Serpentbone Blade as much as it is about how absolutely ridiculous both bleed is and power stance curved swords and their running attack, because they are pretty ridiculous. But consider it maybe a double video in that regards, because in a lot of these clips you probably do see me lean heavily on the curved sword aspect of this build. But you know what? That was fun. I tried many times to really lean on the katanas, and there was plenty of clips where I did get lots of kills with just the katanas, and it was super cool and a dope time. But it was both probably more effective and more fun for me, at least, to have that almost moment of just switching, getting the poison. It's like a weird dance, you know? I'm struggling to describe it, but you get the poison, you switch to the curved swords, you run at someone, and you can just see the panic in their eyes as their health bar completely disappears when you bleed them instantly. There's something kind of beautiful about it, you know? And I think that's what matters most. So at the very least, I recommend you try the Serpentbone Blade, as it is a fun weapon to use. Maybe I'm missing something regarding it, and you can fill me in if I have missed something in this video. I do think this is probably the best way to use the weapon. I tried using it on its own, like I said in the beginning of the video, and it wasn't that good. It doesn't inflict poison very well on its own. It doesn't do a lot of damage on its own, and you're stuck with double slash, which isn't the worst thing ever, but why wouldn't you just use another katana with double slash that has more damage? So there it is. It's not the best at anything. It is very cool looking, though, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm sorry for being away for a bit longer than usual. I was on vacation, but going forward I'm planning to do a lot more videos. I've said that before, but this time I do plan on it. It's the summertime now. Not that I'm in school, but you know, when you're in the summer and the weather is extremely hot out, I don't feel like going outside ever, so I plan on doing lots of Elden Ring PvP videos that I hope you'll enjoy. There are lots of other unique weapons out there that I want to talk about. Some weapons are unique and good. Some weapons are unique and bad. And some weapons are not unique at all and bad. And some weapons are not unique at all and also very good. And we'll talk about all of them. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know how I can improve these videos. And as always, remember to like and subscribe. It really does support me and help me keep going. You guys have given a lot of support to me in terms of how many subscribers I've gotten for pretty much, in my opinion, not really doing a whole lot. So I appreciate that. I plan to put more effort in to show that I care about that kind of shit. But anyways, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.